I think, I mean, one of the reasons that I read that, I gave a long introduction, is that Paul is a distinguished and esteemed and award-winning economist. And so when he describes what happened in the 1930s, he describes a prescription for economic stagnation and collapse, according to the conventional wisdom of today. And so, to me, the most interesting aspect of it is that you have an economist that says when we soak the rich, when we allowed unions to go completely wild, when we created rules that shrunk the rich and the poor and created a middle class, we created 20 years, 25 years of enormous prosperity.
Yeah,
I think you might want to speak to that.
Yeah, these days, people tell you, if you would raise taxes on the top end, even bring them back to what they were in the Clinton years, that it'll crush the economy, which is kind of hard for. But this comes from the White House every week. If we revoke the Bush tax cuts for the top incomes, it'll do terrible things to the economy because we all remember how badly the economy did in the 90s. And if you raise wages, you seek to increase the minimum wage, it'll lead to huge unemployment, and unions are terrible. And then you look at America in the post-war generation. When that socialist Dwight Eisenhower was in the White House, a third of American workers were in unions. The minimum wage was actually higher in purchasing power terms than it is now. Despite, of course, we're a lot more productive than we were then. The top tax rate, the top bracket, was 91%.
And it went up under Eisenhower.
Yes, it went up. Well, that was the Republican Party as it was then, and they actually believed that if you had a war, a Cold War, in his case, that you were actually supposed to pay for it, and so that included an increase in top tax rates, and of course that period with tax rates that would now be considered, you can't possibly, there'd be no incentives, the economy couldn't work. Unions were terribly destructive. It was actually the greatest economic boom in the history of, actually in the history of the planet, I believe. They can't find anything like that amazing period of prosperity for the United States in the 28 years after World War II, until the oil shocks caused a problem.
Now, couldn't one say, as a devil's advocate, that one might say, well, in the post-war period, the United States was enormously dominant in the world economy. Globalization was not a problem with us in terms of imports. The dollar was God. We had 80% of the world's gold supply. So couldn't one say that we could create a structure like that because we were quite insulated from competition?
Well, this is where there are a lot of things that we now are told you can't do that not only did we do in the past, but that other countries do even now. So to take jumping ahead to where I talk about what we should do, but universal health care. Told you can't afford that, except the odd thing is that every other advanced country has universal health care, and it's cheaper than our system. And it's even a competitive advantage economically. So you may not know this, but the big three automakers are enthusiastic supporters of a single-payer healthcare system in Canada. That is their Canadian subsidiaries lobby the Canadian government not to meddle with their system because they say it's a huge competitive advantage because we don't have to pay healthcare costs, whereas here on this side of the border, the auto companies, General Motors spends more on healthcare than it does on steel. So a lot of the things that we're told you can't do because it's a global economy, other countries which also have to operate in that same global economy do just fine and in fact benefit from it.
We'll get to healthcare in a minute, but I want to ask you right now, because you brought it up, that the American automobile companies are are going into collapse in part because of the healthcare issue. And as you say, north of the border, they're for single payer. South of the border, they talk about healthcare being a problem, and they talk about universal healthcare, maybe sort of kind of, but why is it that they're not, even on their deathbeds, or at least close to their deathbeds, why is it that they're not becoming a political force for it?
That's one of the, actually it's a bit of a mystery, though there are a couple of things we can think of. One is they're afraid. I mean, for so long, American politics has been dominated by people who would, punish a company that was on the other side. They really have been afraid to step out that far in front. The other thing, you do want to always make a distinction between the interests of the company and the personal interests of the executive. And that might be as broad as, well, the CEO likes low taxes, or it might be as trivial, but they'd be blackballed at the country club if you came out for a single-payer healthcare system. So there is a real, but it's an amazing thing. Why haven't we been able to get a full-throated advocacy of something that would actually be good for business, from business? Let me say the other thing about global. We talk about global competition. And it's true that manufacturing industries, there's more international competition, but we're not mostly a manufacturing economy. And not to put too fine a point on it, why isn't Walmart unionized? It is the largest employer in the United States. It's not facing international competition. It is, by the standards of the way America worked in the 50s and 60s, a natural target for unionization. Now, of course, there is an answer, but it has nothing to do with globalization or technology. It is that Walmart became a big company during the 1980s, during a period when Ronald Reagan has basically declared open season for union busting. And as a result, it wasn't so much that existing unions were smashed as the companies were able to block unionization. And that's just an example of the ways in which politics has driven the economics. The fact that we are a largely non-union economy now, overwhelmingly non-union, is not something that happened because the world changed and unions were no longer relevant. In the 1960s, Canada and the United States both had about 30% of their workers in unions. Canada still has, I think it's a bit more than a quarter of its workers in unions. The United States is down to 11%. Same global economy, same technology, different politics.